coming up on Open Source with Tony Mottley.
So we say, okay, my customer is an e-commerce site, but then the next level is who is actually making the buying decision. Is it the CRM manager or is it the product manager, right? So at that level, once I know, then all my marketing activities are geared towards that. And that actually in turn reduces my cost of acquisition. All my messaging is geared towards that persona. So the whole idea of, I guess, the growth hack, the principle underlying is know who you're selling to.
This is the Open Source Podcast with Tony Mottley. Welcome to Open Source with Tony Mottley. My guest today is Ravi Trivedi. Ravi has been knee-deep in marketing and software engineering and tech venture capital in the United States and India. And he represents businesses, I guess, or has dealt with businesses in over 150 different countries. Ravi, welcome to Open Source.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Tell us about your career and I guess some of the places that you've been. You went to school in the United States, so just give me a really brief scenario about who Ravi Trivedi is academically.
Sure. I mean, I have done a ton of stuff, but I'll begin by saying I did a master's in computer science, worked at Hewlett-Packard for several years, started off as a software engineer, then consulting and sales for them, and then moved on to do a school. I went to Duke for my MBA. Post that, I spent a few years in Wall Street covering tech stocks. Decided that was interesting, but I wanted to do more longer-term investing, so moved to venture capital career in North Carolina. And then that got me interested into entrepreneurship as I was seeing more early-stage startups. And somewhere around 2011, and I decided to move back to India largely for personal reasons. And then I ended up starting companies. And this is my second company I've been building. Again, I bootstrapped my company. The name of my company is called PushEngage, and it does web push notifications.
Okay, so PushEngage. Push notifications. Everybody's heard of it at some point, but really, what are we talking about when we say push notifications?
Sure. So the first thing is this is a platform for web push, which means on the browsers. That means a desktop or a mobile browser. And so it means it's accessible to everybody, whether you have a mobile app or not, right? So that's the first thing. The second is it came about because there was a need for websites that they have a ton of visitors who come, but they come only one time and they don't come back to the site. So this solves that problem by saying, hey, do you want to get notification? And yes, then you send. And I'll tell you where it fits very well. So let's say you're playing a game and you want to be alerted of few things that happen in the game. So games are a classic example for notification. The other one could be, a price alert. You'll say, hey, I want a ticket from New York to San Francisco, but send me an alert when it's below $300 round trip because that's really a great deal. So the idea of alerts has always been there. Now they came to browsers, and we kind of extend the website by giving this to a customer so they don't need to visit your site and they get all the information where they are. So that's the whole use case right there.
So this is something that happens on the back end, or are customers or users aware? Do they have to actively accept the push notification? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. So they visit your site for, let's say, the first time, and let's say your podcast site, and they say, hey, you know what? I want to be alerted about the next time you publish your podcast. And they say, yes, send me a notification. And when they say allow, they become your subscriber. Kind of very similar to email, except that you don't pass any personal information and you're just saying allow, and you have the full access if you want to, disable that, the subscription in other words. So that's all you do. And that's how the website owner then has the ability to send you these alerts and notifications on your browser, and they reach you even when you're not browsing the site. So maybe you'll be at Facebook or something else, or the browser is running in the background, they'll reach you. So that's the whole use case. And again, they've been very powerful in the sense last 4 years. This is a new technology. Chrome started support in April 2015. We as a company launched in 2016 January. And we have seen tremendous, engagement from the user. And that's why it has become really mainstream over time. I mean, it's just picking up, but it's becoming mainstream. and businesses like news sites who are sending breaking news, or e-commerce businesses who are sending price alerts, inventory alerts, or cart abandonment. I mean, those are kind of the use cases we are seeing a lot more happen.
And so the people that you're dealing with when you do the workshops and you're speaking engagements, what is the average business owner or marketer? What's the value of PushEngage to those people?
Yeah, so great question. We see for a e-commerce site, this is like a new channel, just like just like email marketing, like I was saying, and it drives anything between 5 to 15% extra revenue. Similarly, for a publisher or a media site, we see anything between 10 to 30% extra traffic. Again, the workshops I do are more like a pro bono stuff, which is just as my way to share what I have learned. I mean, I'm a marketer. And prior to this, for example, I ran and built a coupon site for Southeast Asia, like a Retail Me Not for the US, right? And that actually, and the prior experiences around, how to acquire customers for cheap. So I just do this workshop helping, fellow startups or other companies around how to do customer acquisition the right way. So that's kind of the workshop that you're referring to.
Okay, and I've noticed in the workshop you had a lot of information, valuable information, and you talked about best practices when you were in the context of your hacks or whatever you're discussing there.
Sure.
But talk about best practices in terms of marketing online.
Yeah, so I think the first rule, I guess, again, it's a fundamental question. If you really want to acquire users at a very reasonable price, the first thing is to have the targeting, which means having understanding who your customer is in the sense of micro, level. So, for example, I can say, my customer is and I'll give PushEngage as an example, where we try to acquire customers. So we say, okay, my customer is an e-commerce site. But then the next level is who is actually making the buying decision. Is it the CRM manager or is it the product manager, right? So at that level, once I know, then all my marketing activities are geared towards that. And that actually in turn reduces my cost of acquisition. All my messaging is geared towards that persona. So the whole idea of, I guess, the growth hack, the principle underlying is know who you're selling to and just build all your messaging for that. So that's like a simplified version. And then there are more specific stuff we talk about, whether we talk about messaging optimization, whether we talk about ad optimization or variety of stuff which work well, or growth hacks. For example, I think you used that word a few times. I must mention, for example, we use powered by PushEngage as a way by which people know that this site is powered by PushEngage for push notifications. And so if you're a free user, we are fine, you can use it. But then on your notification, there's a pop-up comes, which says powered by PushEngage. So that's, for example, is our growth hack, which actually helps us drive more signups. So that's just two examples right there. So
when you talk about market and segmentation, I think it's critical. We're not talking about demographics. We're talking about specific behaviors and buying decisions, deeper information than just male, age 45 or something like that. Can you explain that premise, that concept?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I think for some, maybe the demographic is the right way to think as well. I must give that. But given, for example, what we are the audience we sell to, we sell globally, like PushEngage, for example, sells in 150 countries. Over 10,000 site user product. We do around 5 billion push notifications per month. So as a result, we may have a customer who is English speaking, non-English speaking. So his persona is more important. What is the role they have at that company and what objective they have. So these are all folks who are, for example, people who are focused on engagement or their metric is repeat users in their company. So that's why that becomes so much important. But in some cases, there could be a demographic-based segmentation that you would do. But I guess the simplest rule I want to share is, number one, always begin by targeting. Anything that's too broad, it'll make it too costly and the messaging is going to be too broad. So that's the whole, like the Uber principle, if I may begin with, right? And then we can layer more stuff on top of it. like I was talking about one of the hacks we were talking about. But once you have the targeting right and you have the messaging right, then you can run ads that can perform well.
Now, in one of your lectures or one of your discussions, you were talking with your audience about the person who's ranked highest in organic listings gets about 55% of that traffic, and then it goes down dramatically to numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5. Explain what that's all about.
Yeah, no, again, that's a great one you're talking about. So organic search or SEO rank is actually one of the top, I guess if I may call it a growth hack. Again, a lot of folks already know about it, but how do you do that is the question. And why is that? Those are the numbers. So the thing we have seen is this is a consumer behavior. When you search for a result, you trust Google because you know that Google knows more about these sites, and you trust that they actually deliver a pretty good experience when you search something. So people do trust the first search result more than anybody else or anything else. So as a result, the first position in organic gets around 55% of the clicks of the whole volume. So if your volume of search is say 100, you're getting 55 clicks. So that's huge. So if you are able to, for example, rank number 1, number 2, or number 3, you will do phenomenally well. And again, it's not easy to rank those, but if you do the right things the right way, I think you have a great shot. And that actually is one of the secret sauce we have seen with any of the top companies. If you see whether it's a SaaS or consumer company, you will almost always see that they always rank very high in organic search.
Now, we don't want to give everything away, but give us an idea of some of the things that we can do to improve where we rank. How to improve our standing in searches?
Sure. So I think the fundamental question in organic search is more around, do you have the authority for what you want to rank? So I'll just begin by that principle. So let's say, I'll just take our example again. So PushEngage is about web push notifications. So if there is an article about web push notifications, we should have that authority in the space, and Google recognizes that, okay, they are credible in this space. And what are those signals? These signals could be, for example, I'm listed in a directory which ranks us into a category web push notification. I am in, let's say, so many SaaS directories. So for example, if you want to give this signal to, Google, you better make sure you're listing in the right places, right? For example, SaaS directories, G2 Crowd, Captera. There are tons of SaaS review directories and other places. So there's just a signal, so they know you're in this space. The second, of course, which everybody talks about is content, right? And it's about original content that helps the user. Now, think where we sit. We sit as a platform, so we see a ton of data, and I'm just giving an idea of what content to write. So we see a ton of anonymous data around what's working in web push, what time maybe you should send a notification, what's the frequency you should send. If you are in this geo, what is working, what is not. And so, for example, we would aggregate that data and then publish it out as a white paper or a benchmark report. Now, that's like the original content which your customers want to know about, and you have it on your site. So one was authority I was talking about. And again, there are more steps to authority. I can talk more on that. But this is the second side, which is content, original content, which your customers are looking for, and that will benefit them, right? The other set of, the one example I was a benchmark, the other could be around what are they really searching for. So for example, one of the common questions people may have on web push is, it's a new channel, what's the ROI of the channel? How does it compare to email? How do you, do it in a way that you're not locked to a vendor? So those are the concerns which my buyer may have, and I would write articles around those so they help them, right? And that kind of then increases maybe your authority as well as your ability to rank on some of those things that are relevant to the user. So that's, I guess, a summary. And then finally, the third part, which is becoming increasingly very important, is the speed at which you load your site. So if you're desktop and if you're in consumer space, less than 2 seconds is what we would say. and in the mobile as well. I mean, ideally it's less than 1 second, right? And this is like the first, what we call the first pain. So over time, customers expect the results to come very quickly, at least the first portion of it. So loading the site very fast is very important, I guess. Then there are those technical parts.
I'm sorry, Ravi. How do you influence your site load ability? How can we make our sites load faster?
Yeah, no, again, that's a great question. There's a ton of work that happens on that. The number one I would say is if you're a large content site, use what we call as a CDN or a content distribution network, which means, let's say I am a global site and I'm accessing you from the United States, I'm accessing you from Australia. So if my server is sitting somewhere, I don't know, maybe in London, the times to reach it will be longer. So there is this concept of the content distribution network where the local copies store the stuff, right? So like an Akamai or CloudFront, there are many of those, right? They just keep those copies close by. So that CDN, for example, is like a no-brainer. Most tools have like a single-click CDN integration. So your page starts loading fast. That's number one. Number two, you have these tools like Google Page Speed Insights or GT Metrics, where you can run analysis of your site and it will say, okay, these are the 5 things you got to improve. Maybe you're putting too many JavaScripts, or maybe, again, I know I'm talking a little technical, but it will tell you what to do to improve your load time. So doing those things actually help a lot. And even somebody who is not very technical can do some of those very easily. So CDN is definitely one of them that with a single click, use this content distribution network, which kind of acts as the caching layer in front of your site. And the second one, and that's like a single click. And the second one is around use these tools to see where you can improve your, page load. And use a good hosting. I mean,
right. I was going to ask you about, someone asked me the other day about whether Wix or someplace like that, they should use a platform like that to host their website, or should they just go to a developer, or should they do a WordPress site? What are your thoughts?
So again, part of the answer depends on what's your budget and how much you're able to, and what level you want to kind of get into. In the enterprise space in where we operate, where let's say you can spend, say, $500, okay, just on a blog, okay? I would say doing it directly and say using something like a Kinsta hosting, which has been really well, especially for, say, WordPress. Okay, if you're doing WordPress example I'm giving, so each there is a different platform. Wix is also great. Weebly is also great. Squarespace is also great. You got to maybe make a page and see how fast they load. Eventually, if it's going to be a high traffic site, then most people are doing self-hosting. And like a Kinsta or maybe doing Amazon or DigitalOcean. So, for example, we are all Amazon hosted largely, so we do it in-house. But folks can, look at alternate variety of options. But always just remember, maybe you're saving a little bit on the hosting cost, but you're not going to do well if the page is not loading. So maybe it's much better sometimes to spend a little more on the hosting at a really fast or a dedicated server. Especially if you're serious about this.
Can you get the kind of tweaks and performance that you want through a Weebly or a Wix that you can through some other platform? Are you limited there?
So I will begin by saying that I'm not actually an expert on Weebly and Wix, although we support. So I don't know 100%, but I think most of these are well optimized to the extent that you can do. But I guess the more advanced the users, they usually do either WordPress, I have seen, or custom, custom sites. Those
so
are the
WordPress continues to be a viable platform for building websites.
Yeah, and the thing with WordPress is because of the adoption, there are a ton of providers, like I was naming Kinsta. We have done a lot of study on where you can load WordPress very fast, right? Even our blog is actually on WordPress, and we actually had in-house hosting for our blog. Then we did a benchmark with Kinsta, and we found them to be good, right? Again, I'm not trying to pitch them, but this is our experience, honestly. And we said, and that's because they just focus on WordPress hosting, and they've done a reasonably good job. They're a little expensive, but they've done a really good job of doing all the caching, all the stuff I was talking about, just a single click. And so if you are a little serious, maybe that is You don't have to do a lot of coding and other stuff, and then you get the performance that you're looking for. But that's huge nowadays. I have to tell you that. Like, that's the number one thing, if I may say, on SEO is like load your site fast. Load your site fast.
Now, Ravi, I have to ask you a question. If you were 17-year-old Ravi and you were starting all over again, would you pursue the tech career that you pursue? What made you make the decisions that you did starting out to become the entrepreneur, the marketer that you are right now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I was going to add a little more color to my background. So if you look at what I have done, or when I reflect upon, I've probably made many contrarian calls. So right after B school, I was in Wall Street. That's probably it was actually a very high-paying job. It helped me pay all my college loans. And then when I moved to venture, it's probably slightly less paying, right? But I was getting more satisfied. That is what I wanted to, do. And I think so. So I tell my friends, I've been a contrarian. I've probably moved from being from the highest paying job to something which maybe pays nothing. But I have always moved in the direction of where my passion is and what I really want to do, what will make me happy. Again, it's a tough call to move in those directions. But I had one rule, which is when the day comes that I'm on my deathbed or I'm going to die, I should have no regret that, hey, listen, I didn't do this in my life, right? So I wanted to do. So entrepreneurship was a very tough call for me. I started when I was 35, almost too late in some sense, where your opportunity cost is huge. I had a family. My son was 4 years. And it's just, but then I had this thing which I said, no, I really want to do it because I don't want to regret later. And it's okay to take a little hit. My wife was working, so it's okay. I can take a little risk, and it's been fine. I mean, it's not been a bed of roses, the journey, but then we have done okay after a few years, and I'm glad that I made the choice.
When you reflect back on your Wall Street days, and we all see movies about Wall Street and we see it every day in the news, what is so stressful about being a Wall Street trader?
So I think I was an equity analyst. We were about stocks. I think the stress in there, I mean, I had one take on that. I think there's a lot of money. The volume is huge. And when you have a ton of money, there's a ton of greed. When there is a ton of greed, there's a ton of aggression, sometimes undue and unwanted, right? And of course, the best traders are probably very calm, from inside, so they're able to make those calls. So that's something that I find in some sense it's really good because you got probably some of the best, to be honest, some of the best colleagues I ever worked with were in Wall Street, right? They're really smart, they're really good, they're really committed, right? So that's that side. But then there is this, because of money involved and the greed involved, there is so much stuff that happens around it. It's all about money that it sometimes seems too much to me, to somebody like me. So that's, I guess, so those are the two sides. But in terms of satisfaction and the result that you do, specifically in the trading or a research job that we were in, you can see your results quickly. Versus say a startup, when you launch, you have to wait for years, and there are so many factors on the trading and the side. It's just like immediate results, right? So those are the pros and cons, I guess. But again, I enjoyed my time most definitely and learned a ton.
When you look at business right now in the web and mobile platforms and all these other places where you can place your content or your message or whatever, what would you suggest? Do people need to build a website? Should they build a mobile platform? How do they decide where to go with these?
So the number one thing I would say, depends on who you are, right? If you're a blogger, right? And again, so it depends on, we've got to ask the segmentation question, who you are. And if you give me a persona, I can maybe build for them. So shall I assume a blogger? Is that okay? I'm a blogger.
Sure.
I want to write.
That'd be fine.
Yeah. So for a blogger, let's say, and I'm, let's say, writing about maybe a technical help article. So I'm just writing about how to be a business blogger or maybe about hosting. So if your market is global, right? So the first thing I would say is absolutely mobile. So the whole idea about where to be, the answer comes from where are your customers? So are your customers browsing on the mobile browser? Are they consuming it through an app? Then that's where you got to be. If your customers are not on website, for example, there may be some segments which only sell through trade shows. You then got to be at the trade show. So it's all about where the customer is. The technology and the other part, in my opinion, is like the second order thing, right? The first order is who is your customer and where do they hang out? Just once you answer that, you just got to be there where they are. Whether they communicate through, for example, mobile, desktop, all the stuff we talked, or they communicate through WhatsApp or some other of these chat platform. I mean, just got to be there, or TikTok. I mean, there are like ton of places. So, for example, for gamers, there are different sites for young gamers, right? My son is at 12 and he plays these games, and I know they hang out on different sites. So, if I have a gaming site is doing something related to that, then I got to be on those live streaming platforms. So, it's just the answer depends on that. But of course, high level, definitely mobile is huge. And again, if you have the budget, you can't make an app, then you should look at mobile websites. They've become very well nowadays. And with things like push notification, they almost give you all what you need from a mobile app. So you can easily have a mobile website. You don't need to do an app, but being on mobile is huge, definitely.
Just roughly speaking, I know it's difficult to say, but what kind of budget are we talking about to build a mobile application?
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat that again, please?
What sort of budget are we looking at if we're considering a mobile application? What are we looking to spend?
Okay, sure. So I would say a very basic app. We're looking at anything between say $20,000 to $40,000. To get that done. Well, and then maybe there's some amount of maintenance to that. But that's kind of So that's the range I would suggest.
Wow, that's significant money, though. I mean, if you're going to spend $20,000 at least, that's not a chump change. So that's an investment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's why this thing about using your website on the mobile phone is as good. And like I was going to use one more word called the progressive web app. So that's kind of what's coming or already happening on mobile websites. This is the way your website becomes closer to a mobile app. And again, there are vendors who do that for a much lower rate, or you can just have a plain vanilla mobile website, which means maybe you can even open a Wix site and then it appears nice on your mobile phone. That's totally fine. But you can definitely do things what mobile apps do, like notifications, which, for example, I'm saying we do, even for Wix or Weebly or other platforms. So you're able to at least get that benefit. So, and you don't have to spend a ton.
So when someone wants to get involved with PushEngage, what do they need to do?
It's a pretty straightforward process. Open an account. We have a free account, and we have accounts from, say, $29 all the way up. And depending on, again, what you need, you can buy that or take a free plan and then just integrate. Integration is often like adding 2 lines of code, which is like 2 lines of text. In some of the platforms, we have like deeper integration. So it's like click, 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 and done. So it's usually pretty straightforward to integrate, and then you then gather subscribers and then you send notifications. I guess the other thing is we talk about segmentation a lot to our customers, which is like, okay, you got to know what your customer preference is. Let's say if I am an e-commerce store and I'm visiting, say, the iPhone, that means I'm an Apple buyer versus I'm an Android buyer, or versus, I'm interested in, I don't know, maybe I'm a news junkie, so I read more US politics versus sports, and which sports. So knowing the preference of the user is what we call a segmentation, just like you do maybe segmentation in a list. And we tell from day one, build in your system so that when you're sending your alerts, it's targeted to what they want, right? And that just engages the user a lot more. And then we have a lot of automation, and we encourage users to use that. For example, I could say, you know what, this is a user who searched for, say, a mobile phone, but didn't do a purchase. I know they're probably searching for it in the next 7 days. So maybe I can send an alert maybe on day 3 or day 5 or something like that. And that, for example, our system can automatically detect and send. So use a lot more automation in the tool is what I would say to anybody who's going live with PushEngage.
And we're going to see more and more AI as we go forward, aren't we?
Yeah. And I think the underlying for AI is the data that we gather, which is around what people are doing. And when we say the word AI, it's all about smart things, which is that the system understands what I really want and send me that information, right? So it's all about that, the context and the personalization. And I think that's very important these days.
Great. Ravi, tell people how they can reach you. What's your contact information?
Sure. So I'm on Twitter at Trivedi Ravi, or you can even tag our company PushEngage. That's usually the best public way. But otherwise, again, I can give my email as well. It's ravi@pushengage.com. Always available. If you're a marketer, happy to help, or otherwise as well as an entrepreneur. So that's kind of my content.
That's great, Ravi. I really appreciate you sharing 30 minutes with our audience on open source. And again, it's Ravi Trivedi, and he is with PushEngage. He is the boss at PushEngage, and I guess 150 countries worldwide are using PushEngage. Is that right?
That's correct.
Well, thanks, Ravi, for joining us on Open Source. We'll talk to you guys next time. Open Source with Tony Mottley is a production of Duet Digital Media and McLaughlin Media.